tabernacle of meeting, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when any one of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering to of the livestock, of the herd, and of the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own free will at the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. Then he shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make an atonement for him. He shall kill the bull before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. He shall skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. And the sons of Aaron and the priests shall put fire on the altar and lay the wood on the order on the fire. And the priests, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts of the head and the fat in order on the wood that is on the fire, the burnt upon the altar. But he shall wash its entrails and its legs with water. And the priest shall burn all on the altar as a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. If his offering is of the flocks, of the sheep, or of the goats, as a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring a male without blemish. He shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's son, shall sprinkle its blood all around on the altar. And he shall cut it in its pieces, and its head, and its fat, and the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire on the altar. But he shall wash the entrails and the legs in the water. Then the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Any thoughts on that? Any ideas, questions, comments?
One of the things that the Levites did not kill animals, people did.
Yeah.
Kill their own animals, in other words, they have to invest the flocks, they're probably more or less bad.
Right.
Get rid of that animal.
It's one of the key elements of this is your sacrifice. This is nobody else's. This is yours. You gotta deal with this. You gotta take care of this. Follow through. And this is the burnt offering when we talk about the first element of fundamental element of a relationship is valuing the person. Okay, I'm placing a value upon God. I'm going to bring the very best that I have to offer, and I'm not just gonna open up my pocketbook and hand you a check. I'm going to deal with this. In fact, the word for laying on hands isn't gently. It's all you take all the strength that you can muster, and you're holding this animal with all the strength that you can bring to bear. That's the idea when you lay your hands on it. It is as though, and the whole idea of sacrifice is the idea of substitute. This animal and everything about this animal represents me. I'm giving myself over to God, fully, completely. That's what the burnt offering represents.
And it couldn't be the worst, and it couldn't be something
No.
you didn't care about. You could got by and almost starve
Right.
it.
And that's actually the deal with Ananias and Sapphira.
Yes.
Is that they were kind of making a show of things, right?
Yeah.
So the very important thing, what sacrifices were mandatory? That's a really important concept here. What sacrifices were required of the Jewish people? None. They were not required to do any sacrifice, even for sin offerings. If you want to go and be in fellowship with God, if you want to be part of the priest, celebrate at the tabernacle as part of the community, yes. You can't pick and choose what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. Either you're in or you're out.
Yeah.
But none of the sacrifices were mandatory. They were all, you bring the sacrifice by your own free will. So if you're bringing it of your own free will anyway, well, I'm going to bring my own free will, but there's this dog back in the bag. Not a dog, a lamb that's lame, or why bother? Why would you do that? So if you're not bringing your best, and that's a lot of the whole element of worship that if you're going to come and be part of it, do it. Don't just go through the motions.
That was the same thing with Cain and Abel.
Yeah, exactly. It is exactly the same thing.
Same thing. That
Yeah.
was Cain and Abel. Because, it wasn't that he didn't have his Cain brought a sacrifice. He did not bring a blood sacrifice.
Well, he did. In this, they were offering the sacrifice that they were offering was first fruits. And so it was appropriate for him to bring a meal, as in, or grain, as first fruits. But it said, but he wasn't, but it was the spirit that he was bringing. It wasn't appropriate. He
Wasn't
he wasn't bringing.
And that's why God didn't,
Yeah.
that's why God, it's not that didn't care what he did, he just did not bring, he wasn't being obedient.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
out of obedience.
On the first half when it tells it,
Gotta tick on the first.
the first time you, the first part, it says that the priest washes your toes and the legs. But on the second half, it says he does it.
Right. Do you know why? You know why that would be? We were talking about the difference between a bull, which is a 1,300-pound animal,
Oh.
and a ram or a lamb, which is a 150-pound animal.
I thought it was reading.
No, one's a bull, really big animal, and so, but the key is that the person himself, they're responsible for the process. They're not just giving it over and, okay, priest, take care of this for me. They're part of the whole way through. If you go on, in the next one we'll read, you have the two turtle doves or two young pigeons, and actually the priest kills them. And every other animal, the person kills the animal, but the pigeons and the doves, the priest kills. You know why? Because they don't want you to cut yourself. You know, it's a difficult, and so yeah.
How do you birth the next?
No, you actually, it's interesting because rabbinically what they would do is they kept their thumbnail long and sharp, and they would use their thumbnail like a knife to cut the bird's throat. You asked.
Yeah.
Then I just grab the bird by the head and spin.
No, because it has to be kosher. It has to be a clean kill, and so it has to bleed out. It has
Bleed
to
out.
be bled out. It's interesting because what's the priest's role in this whole process? Do you remember what the priest did with the blood? What his whole purpose of being in there is take the blood and sprinkle it on the altar.
And also some of the body parts that he had there.
Right, he arranged everything on the fire.
Like,
There's a lot of really interesting things about this. First is that you have the fire. First, the fire on the altar is always burning. It doesn't burn out. It's always going. And yet, for every offering, the priest is to add wood to the fire. For every offering. And the significance is suggesting that wood is a very mundane thing. And so your offering to God can't be a simple spiritual ideal thing. It has to be connected with the world that's around it. Your offering to God has to be in context of the life that you're living.
mhm.
Anything else? The word Corban or offering? No, wait, can you say something?
No.
No? The word Corban is something we also mess up. Corban, we think of sacrifice, we think the idea of giving up something that's ours to benefit someone else. That's what we think. In Hebrew, the word Corban, which is what's translated offering, means to draw near. It's not about giving something, us staying over here and giving something to God that was ours. It's about building the relationship between us, drawing near to God through the idea of sharing things with Him.
I'm building a bridge to him.
Yeah, you're growing in that relationship.
It says that offering means to dwell near.
To draw near, draw near.
Right here it says cattle in mine, because we have different versions. I have the King James,
How come you have the King James?
because I like it. I understand it.
I don't understand the way this one says. See the tree?
So, cattle versus what?
It says here cattle in my version here.
Right.
All right, some of it, did he mean a cow, or, because we
No.
call that cattle?
We had mail.
Well,
Or a male cow, a bull.
the word,
is a male, and a ram is
Right.
a boy
different
and a
animals,
sheep.
right? And these are, I don't think it specifies a male or female.
Yeah, this one
Oh, this
does.
one.
It says male. Mine says male.
Mine just says young boy.
Well, bull is a male.
Bull is a
Bull
male.
is their male.
A bull is a male. A bull is a cow.
I know.
What verse are you looking at?
Where did it say that? If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of a bird, let him offer a male without
Okay.
blemish.
Right,
He shall
right.
offer it of his own volunteer.
Right.
Will
That's
be
what mine
at the
says.
door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, and it shall put his. That tells you how he wants
Right.
it done.
So, right,
The
so
cattle.
that's,
It's in the second verse.
so it starts, basically he starts from the
Says
most,
cattle.
the mine says cattle? I think mine says bull, actually.
Well, bull is
I
a
mean,
cow.
Right, so it's a bull, a male cow,
It has to
boy
be a cow.
Boy, a bull.
This has to be a cake. Go get a sheep.
Right.
What
So-
if they didn't have? Well, I'm getting the question. What if they didn't have cattle? They go buy the best of them if they can.
They probably have cattle or sheep.
If they have the financial means, and we'll get to that, that's actually, it goes from the
Well,
most
well,
expensive
measured back
to the least expensive. It goes from the most financially lucrative, the bull is the most expensive thing that you could have, to
Yeah.
the very least would be actually grain. It's like if you can't afford anything else, and we'll get to that. If you can't afford anything else, you just bring some grain. I think in yours it says meat offering, but it's but it's actually a grain offering.
What's
So
the
it
difference
was very
between
most
ox and bull?
In Hebrew, nothing. There is no difference.
No, it's just basically
Big.
the same
Big critter with horns.
horn.
Okay.
That's
But
what
it has to
is.
be a
Big.
male.
Yeah. And so the reason why, if you understand the herding thing at all, the rams and the bulls, one bull or one ram can service 50 ewes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know sometimes the Lord here would say a lamb or a ram.
Right. So rams and bulls
Yeah.
would be actually rare. You don't keep them around
They do much work.
because if you have 5 or 6 rams or 5 or 6 bulls in the same area, you got trouble.
You got trouble.
And
It's
so,
just like the
and so
power
that's why,
struggle.
so you always get rid of those. If you have young bulls,
Yeah.
you dispatch them early in life.
Yeah.
And so that's why, that's the most expensive of all these animals. That would be
Yeah,
the
that's
most.
true.
So it starts with that, and it goes down the least expensive. Very important because it says here that when you offer this bull on the fire, first you skin it. You take the skin off of the bull. You offer the bull, and it's a sweet smelling aroma
Uh-huh.
unto God.
Yeah.
Then you go all the way through. We'll go into the next portion. The guy that's poor, he takes these 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and they cut the throat, and they slit its gullet, and they pull out the crop. The crop is the
The crawl.
where little sack of rocks. That's how the
Yeah,
birds
it's
chew
the
their
crawl.
food.
It's a crawl.
So they take that out, and then they take the bird. They don't pluck it.
Huh.
They don't pluck it. The feathers
I'll
are still
have
on
to-
it,
I've
and
read
they
on
put
this.
that on the fire. Do you know of anything that actually smells worse
The
than
feathers?
wet feathers burning?
No.
But God says
Makes
the
it-
same thing. It is a sweet smelling aroma unto the Lord.
Unto the Lord.
So, very important take home here. What we find value in and what God finds value in is not the same
Same
thing.
thing.
And these
It's
two,
obedience.
right. And so, rabbinically, well, the reason why they say to leave the feathers on is because a bird with feathers on it looks plump and full and
Like,
well, it looks
looks better than
valuable.
that.
You take the feathers off,
it looks like a chicken.
it looks pretty scrawny. And so rabbinically is they don't want the person with the poor offering to be embarrassed by his poorness. And it's worth enduring the smell of the feathers to
Yeah.
give the poor person that sense of honor that he's bringing something of value,
Well,
even though it's a scrawny little
It all
pigeon.
boils down to obedience
Right.
to God.
But that regardless of what your means are,
I know. Okay.
by bringing the best that you have to offer. Now, if you were a wealthy landowner and you brought 2 young pigeons, you just wasted a couple of birds' life. It means nothing. You're not
Nothing
bringing the
to
best
God.
that you have to offer. So why bother? And that's kind of the sense of this. If you're not bringing the very best, if this is not about building your relationship with God, don't bother. And that's what Isaiah chapter 1 is all about.
Yes, it is.
So,
There's nothing to make a book like, as the older book come along, they were used for everything. I even seen that in Germany.
oh yeah,
They were full of carts, they were, plowing.
What do you think?
when he's back.
I was going that way anybody gets that.
But it's, they were, the older animals like that are tough to eat. You don't want to eat them anyhow.
Right.
They're not fed to you.
Yeah, and I think this is a young bull, isn't it?
Well, I was just often, you know, what it
Yeah, it says
says,
young
I would
bull.
have, because God said I would go and try my best to get a cow.
Well, but
I
not
mean,
if you
a
couldn't
bullet,
afford one.
Like it,
Yeah.
but if you can't afford one, and I was wondering about that. You see, because I would have spent everything I had to go get that cow to please God.
Well,
Well,
and
they
the priest,
wouldn't plead, you know, that's what
Yeah.
I said,
That's
get
the
out of
thing.
your own flock.
the priest would have said,
Uh-huh.
you need to go back. You need to take your
Rethink
money and do
this.
this better. They would have.
Redo
So,
think this.
yeah. so.
Well,
See, that's what
that's
the-
good to know. That's
That's
good
what
to
the
know.
temple was doing whenever
Uh-huh.
Jesus cleansed the temple. They were going in and getting old sick sheep and everything else from the priest's
Yeah,
out there for a
Because I
time.
know,
And the priest cut their throats in, so because it's so taken, instead of cutting the
Mind
throat,
your
they
own
sell
sin.
cow, they can get the neck, and then they haul
Right.
it, sell
well,
it.
that was just a good thing to know. It just, because I would have, you know, because I want to please God.
Yeah.
But He don't want you to go
Yeah, but-
beyond your means.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I understand that.
Earlier in Exodus, when they were still making the tents and stuff,
No, our
And-
thinking goes
if certain
sometimes.
people were told they had to do
Right.
something, had to provide
Leviticus
something and
1.
they didn't have it,
We ain't got
It
very
would
far.
be
We've been chasing
provided
rabbits.
for. They would, they
Yeah.
would,
The only thing that everybody was required to provide was a 50-cent piece, a half shekel. Everything else was voluntary. There was no requirement. The only thing everybody was required to do was a half shekel.
Once in a lifetime, or once a year, or?
Oh,
It's,
was it
it's
just-
traditionally once a year. It's traditionally once a year. We don't have that actually.
And was that every person or every man?
Every man over the age of 20.
But you could bring a free will offering above that if you
Right.
what's a shekel?
Well, and then also there's also the
It's a
redemption
coin,
of the
like a
first
penny
born
or
is
nickel.
another
Oh.
sacrifice and all.
I was wondering what type of coin.
It's a